That's fine.
The way I see faith is the worldview that you place your chips on. You have to place your chips somewhere. You're going to live your life. I'll use this as an example. I don't know if my wife is faithful to me. Okay. Now I'm 99.999% sure that she's faithful to me, but I can't know it. I don't quote unquote know it. Right. But I'm 99% sure that she is or more. And so therefore my behavior reflects that faith, that belief that she is. At some point I may have doubts. Maybe something happens where I'm kind of like, that was kind of weird. Is she cheating on me? Let's say now I'm 70% sure. Now I say it's 50% sure because something else weird happens. Well, what is the point at which I change my behavior related to her? I divorce her. I say, okay, I'm done. You know, I I think you've cheated on me, or and people may have, maybe if your wife is just a jerk and you already have a crappy marriage anyway, and you don't really like being around her, I might jump ship at like 80%. I'm like, yeah, she's probably cheating on me anyway, right? But if I have the greatest marriage in the world and 8 kids and it's just like everything in my life is perfect, I'm going to have a pretty higher threshold before I go and throw that out the window. And I use that analogy with the church. The church in my life, from the perspective of has it been good, is very high. I have a good marriage with the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I think that it works very functionally in people's lives. And there's a lot I think we debate about if it works for everyone, yada yada. But for me, that's the way it's been. And so my threshold for the amount of doubt I'm willing to sustain is higher, because at the end of the day, if my wife was cheating on me, everything's going to change. And I have to go find something new, a new spouse, someone new to marry, a new worldview. And what I like to do, one of the things that I do is I really do truly spend a great deal of my time trying to understand the different worldviews of others. That's why I read Sam Harris. That's why I read Noah Harari's, *Sapiens* book. You get the secular view and the humanistic view of the world and the other religious views of the world. Because at the end of the day, I have to pick some kind of a camp, some sort of a worldview to base my behavior on. Right? I'm gonna end up with some, quote unquote woman, and the question is just who. And so, I guess the only thing I would kind of ask on that is that a good way to frame the situation of trying to find a meaning and purpose for your own behavior in your life? Or is there another way that you would look at it? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so those are very reasonable questions and would be similar to the things that I was asking when I was in the deconstruction phase. I go back to this idea that as human beings, we tend to enmesh these these beliefs and our roles and so forth into our own sense of personal identity. And so it's not only threatening of losing a belief system, but losing of a sense of identity, of moral identity and belonging of who I am. And so it's very, very threatening. And so when people are going through a deconstructive phase, they are negotiating all these kinds of things that you're giving analogies for. So if this isn't true, then but it worked, some of it worked for me, like what am I supposed to do with that? So one analogy that my stake president and very close friend gave me when I was in the beginning, he says, I want you to imagine that you have this beautiful 1,000-piece puzzle on your table that was prescribed to you, and it gave you meaning and purpose in your life, and how you perceived things and your paradigms and everything. And that's what the church gave to you. And then through no fault of your own, your puzzle has been shoved onto the floor, and there's nothing left on the table, and there it is in 1,000 pieces on the floor. He said, what you're going to do now is you're going to lean down and you're going to pick up one piece at a time, and you're going to sit with it, and you're going to look at it, and you're going to decide whether you're going to put it back on the table. And if it's not going to work for you, then you're going to set it aside. But if you think it might work for you, then you're going to set it on your table. And over time, he said, what you're going to do is you're going to build a new puzzle. And it's not going to be as big, and it's not going to have all the 1,000 pieces that it had before. But over time, it's actually going to be a more meaningful puzzle because it's one that you built.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I
Isn't
like
that a
that.
great?
That's
Now,
beautiful.
when he told that to me, like I couldn't even pick up one puzzle. Like I was in so much grief. It was like totally obliterated,
And it
crushed
may not be
everything.
the time for everyone to start picking up the puzzle
Yeah,
pieces.
yeah, well, and you need to go through the, yeah, you can't, unprocessed grief or processed emotions don't go away. They just fester. And
Yeah.
so you have to deal with the grief. You have to put in the work. And
Well,
so over time, that's what I did. Now, I would say that there is a very common period of time of nihilism that people experience when they're in a faith crisis, where nothing has meaning. And when they're in deep grief and they're experiencing nihilism and nothing has meaning, uh, they can get themselves in significant trouble when they're also testing behavioral boundaries, like maybe behavioral boundaries beyond just, I'm going to try a coffee or something like that, right?
yeah, people go
People
off
can get in
and
a lot of trouble when they're in their 30s, 40s, and 50s testing behavioral boundaries like the rest of the world does when they're in college. And
and they
while
do it
they're
for the
all,
first time when they're 45 and have 3 kids.
and they're in grief and they feel pain and anger and everything, it can be very, very unhelpful. And that's why one reason that people in faith crisis really need a significant amount of support, because um, they can make choices that they later
Well,
significantly regret. But I do believe that over time, using that analogy of the puzzle, that people pick up those things. Like I experience a sense, my spiritual experience, like this is about participating in the lives of others. Like that's peace, that works for me. Yeah.
see, and this is where I get frustrated with a lot of the discussion that goes on just in the world today, generally, when it relates to belief systems. Okay. The idea that the problem that I have is that it's so deconstructionist. It's constantly about breaking things down. And the thing is even as an atheist, one of the reasons that Sam Harris is, I always say, is my favorite atheist, is because Sam Harris doesn't just tear down the building. He then goes about the work of trying to offering some sort of a new way. He takes seriously the problem of meaning and the problem of nihilism, and he tries to offer a solution to it. Because I think what happens, to use your analogy, is that the puzzle falls on the ground, and when all those pieces are scattered everywhere and there's nothing on your table, that's nihilism. Okay, that's the point where you just say nothing matters. It's just, and it's horrible. That's the worst
It's
place to be.
painful. It is so
Yeah.
painful. Yeah.
And so to me, it's like, I don't really care that you can tear down a puzzle. What I want to see is, what puzzle are you going to put in its place? Because at the end of the day, you have to begin to put pieces back on, because unless you want to go into the nihilistic life, which even within nihilism, some people might say, well, I can live a nihilistic life. That is constructing a new puzzle. It's a nihilist puzzle. And so it is the construction that I am most interested in. I want to hear what puzzle pieces people have found that work for them and why.
When that all crumbled on me, it ended up amplifying the value of every single human being that I left, like every human being was a gift that had an infinitely valuable story and experience. It was part of building a new puzzle of what meaning and gratitude and connection is, and what the value of life is. And I would say also, just the third thing is, I would say that there were things in my life that I feel like I didn't put as much focus on, because I felt like I would always have the eternities to work on that. So like my wife and I had a really good marriage, but there were things in our marriage that I thought, that's just too much to spend some time on. It'll work out in the eternities, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when I didn't have any more than hope that there would be next life, that put fire in my belly to be a better husband and to nourish and enhance everything that I could to my marriage, so it could be the very best, and our marriage got better from it. So in any event, I understand what you're saying, because that was my experience. But then I went to my faith Christ, and it was amazing. I don't know how to describe it.
And here's the thing: I don't invalidate that, and I've heard that from other people. And frankly, I think that I would, and again, I'll give my take on it, kind of my perspective from my view. I think when you deconstruct your entire faith view, I think a lot of the unhealthy parts of your faith view come crumbling down with it. I actually think that just because you're a Latter-day Saint doesn't mean that you're living the gospel the way that you're supposed to. And I think that there are parts that we should tear down. I think that repentance to a certain extent is getting rid of that. I would say that procrastinating the day of your repentance is one of our key doctrines, that actually what happens is when you don't take advantage of this life, that you actually, those things stick with you. It molds your character to who you really are. And again, I can give that perspective. Now but here's where I worry about that particular view, where it's sort of like, okay, there's only this life, so I got to make the most, and that means I need to love everyone and be kind to everyone, and everyone's life has value. I don't know in my mind that logically follows. I think it logically follows if you sort of have already adopted and internalized certain suppositions about the value of life and about the value of other people and that they matter. But there's a whole other much darker paradigm that I think can emerge from that sort of, this is the only life. I live in a world of limited resources. I have the people that I care about, and then I have my enemies. And what I should do is dominate my enemies to maximize the well-being of the people that I care about, that are in my tribe, in my circle, to enhance my own well-being, and screw everybody else. And my thing
and
is
that
this,
happens.
Yeah, but my thing is that, and I think that most people go down your route. I actually think most people do. I think that most people have that, especially in today's world, where we have a high level of abundance and all of that. But let's go back a few thousand years. If you thought that all you were going to do was live this life, and you lived in a tribal world where you were threatened by your enemies, you would not be saying, love your enemies. You'd be saying, I'm going to kill those enemies to make sure they don't kill me, because this life's all I got. And they're going to try and take everything that I have, and they're going to try and enslave me. They're going to try and make my one existence the worst possible hell there can be, right? So while I can see that perspective can be helpful to people, and I've seen it one of my relatives said, now that I've left the church, I found that I'm more loving to other people, and I care a lot more about other people because the church made me judgmental. And I say to that, I say, good. That's good. Like, I like the idea of the puzzle piece. Pick that puzzle piece back up. Yeah. Being loving and caring about others is a puzzle piece that I think both of us can agree on, even though we may have different justifications for it. And so that's, again, the thing I always go back to, and the thing I get so frustrated with, is the people who spend, like, I get it. I'm for being a critic. I'm for breaking down things that we think are unhealthy. I don't have a problem with that. But when you are primarily a deconstructionist, and there are people that's all they do. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and hit the subscribe button. Also, if you want more content, including the podcast, go to thoughtful-faith.com. Thanks for watching.